Hello and welcome to the United on Wheels podcast. What is up? It's me, Paul Amadeus Lane. I am so delighted to have you on our show today. Why? Because we're going to talk about what it really means to be strong-willed together. Many of you know what I'm talking about. That's the campaign that we're doing this year. And we are so delighted that we've had so many people be involved with this campaign, how we're able to highlight different ones who are part of our community, who are just showing how strong-willed they are and how a collective together we're able to accomplish some great things and to really bring awareness to what we're doing out here for the community. Don't forget, go to our website, unitedspinal.org. And there you can find out what the Strong Will Together campaign is all about, amongst other things that we do over at United Spinal Association. And you might have come across this particular article right here, highlighting Adam Lane. And yes, he is one of my relatives. And when I have him on, you'll be able to look at the family resemblance that we have. But I am so glad that we highlighted his story on what he did. I mean, imagine taking on this task, handcycling through many states, raising awareness for a great cause. We're going to talk to him about this experience and much, much more. So why don't we welcome him on right now? And I am so delighted to have with me right now my next guest, Oklahoma chapter of United Spinal, the great one himself, Adam Lane. Adam, what's going on, relative? How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great.
Got a great last name.
Hey, I told everybody before I brought you on, I said, I'm going to talk to one of my relatives today, Adam. So it's great to talk to Adam today. Yeah, you got a great last name too. Very strong last name, Adam.
Yes, indeed. The resemblance is uncanny too.
Tell me about it. They wouldn't be able to tell us apart, man, if we were walking side by side together. So, but so delighted to have you on. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit before I brought you on about, the amazing feat that you wanted to accomplish, hand cycling and Adam, let's talk about what made you want to do that in the first place, a part of the Strong Willed Together campaign that we have over here at United Spinal.
Well, it's been kind of in the back of my head for a very long time. And fitness has been a huge part of my life after a spinal cord injury. And it has had a huge impact on my mental health and just everything about my life since then. And whether I did triathlons for a while, did Pilates, I've done yoga, I'm a yoga instructor. And I just had this idea of I wanted to do something large and I wanted to give back to United Spinal Association. And so the fact that it worked out that they were doing the Strong Willed campaign this year and I was ready to do the trip, everything just kind of came together perfectly. So that when they talked about one of the things that they were, the United Spinal was wanting to build more awareness for was fitness, it just worked out perfectly that the timing finally fell together for everything. Because I had been training for a couple of years getting ready for this. I had been talking with my employer for sponsorship. I had originally wanted to do it last year and looking for sponsorship in early 2020. Businesses were, not even sure they were going to be open for the following year, much less sponsoring. And so it just worked out that it fell on this year. And with the Strong Willed campaign being this year, everything fell into place. So it worked out perfectly.
And Adam, if you don't mind, why don't you share with us, if it's okay, about a little bit about your spinal cord injury and how that occurred?
Sure. I just celebrated the anniversary this week, actually. So on July 14th of 2007, I rode motorcycles for quite a while and was out riding that day. And I still don't remember the actual accident itself. I remember everything until about 5 minutes before and then a couple minutes after, but I don't remember the actual crash itself. But evidently I leaned into a curb, and for reasons we haven't figured out. I wasn't going too fast. I didn't come across anything in the road, but for some reason I just straightened up and then locked up the brakes, went off the road. The bike threw me, and I hit a 4x4 signpost head first, and completely subluxed my spinal column, completely severed the spinal cord, and woke up on scene. I was a paramedic prior to my injury, and at first I did get knocked out. So at first I was confused and trying to get up, and finally, once I sort of calmed down a little bit, I thought, oh yeah, you're not supposed to move. And so I calmed down, and I was awake and coherent for the ambulance getting there, them taking a look at me, getting me loaded up, getting me to the hospital. So I knew early on that I had a spinal cord injury. I was hoping that it was something else. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew that I couldn't feel my legs. I knew that when they asked me to wiggle my toes, that I wasn't wiggling them. I had a bit of a spiritual awakening, is the best thing that I can call it, on the scene of the injury, and that I knew that no matter what happened to me physically, I was okay, and I was going to continue to be okay. And so that sort of gave me some comfort to continue on and kind of move on and figure out what the next steps in life were.
Adam, when I hear your journey of your spinal cord injury, you and I are so similar. And I'll tell you, not only because we have the same last name, but I was a EMT too here in California, worked for
Okay.
EMS. So you and I are both EMS brothers for life.
Yeah.
And my accident happened. I was on my way home and um, hit a car. I wasn't driving. It was a chain reaction on the 710 freeway here in California. 5 cars, 7 people. I had a subluxation of my spinal cord as well, 6 and 7 sublocked. And interesting thing about me was my job was the one to rescue me. So here I was laying on the freeway, and my supervisor pulls up in the ambulance, and he's like, "Why does that guy look familiar over there laying down?" And they came over. It's like, "Oh wow, it's Paul." So my coworkers surrounded me. They took great care of me, and like you, I was hoping, because of our medical background, that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, because I remember going
Mm-hmm.
into the emergency room, wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers. Can you tap your heel and all these things? And so yeah, that took me back. So, and not only do we have the same last name, but we're EMS brothers for life. So that's really cool. And I don't know about you, Adam, but I was not a bad patient, but because I knew certain things, about what I learned in EMT school about
Mm-hmm.
certain procedures that they were doing. So sometimes me and the CNAs, we would get into it because I'm like, no, you're not going to ice me down with ice when I have a fever, because that's just going to make my fever spike. No, you're not going to ice me down with alcohol because that's going to spike. So I was kind of like, you know, arguing with them. But what about you when you were in hospital? You weren't like me, were you?
Uh, I was shaking my or nodding my head because I am still to this day a bad patient. My sister's a physician, and I'm, former paramedic. And if there's one thing medical people have in common, is we're not always the best patients. But
Yes.
uh, while I was in the hospital, thankfully, I was a fairly easy patient as far as spinal cord injuries go. The only time I was intubated was for my surgery. I didn't really have any issues with fevers or anything. I was out of ICU within a couple of days. And the only reason I didn't move down to the rehab unit from the floor sooner was because they didn't have a bed ready for me. So I didn't give them too much of an option to be a bad patient. But I still find myself doing that from time to time, though, like knowing just enough to be dangerous.
Yes, yes, I get it, Adam. I'm the same way, same way. And Adam, what's the level of your injury again, if you don't mind?
T10, T11.
T10, T11. And what were some
Mhm.
of the things, Adam, that you saw yourself having to kind of grapple with, knowing that you now had a spinal cord injury, certain things that you were used to doing may have been impacted or no longer be able to do that anymore. How did you kind of deal with those changing circumstances?
Uh, I mean, being in EMS was one of the hardest things. And to this day, I see somebody drive by, especially if they're going lights and sirens. I always joke they're playing the songs of my people. Like
I miss
I
that
miss it,
too.
man.
Gosh, I miss that too.
For several years, I think 5 years after till about 10 years after, I lived just down the street from a station. So I would, hear them go out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and part of me would miss it, but then part of me would roll over and go back to sleep and think, okay, it's not so bad. But I mean, so that was definitely part of it. Um, and then I also played the drums prior to my injury, and I know that I can still play percussion, and there's ways that you can modify things to play, a drum kit, but it's just not the same. And I see people that are doing it, and part of me is thinks, man, I should do that because they're just enjoying playing. But part of me also played at a certain level, and so I've talked to several people that do different sports, and a lot of them have said that they got into a sport other than the one that they did prior to the injury because they were competing at such a high level that they can't go back to the same sport. They can do something else and they can compete at that level, and they're not comparing it. But one person had been a professional water skier and had been on a circuit and all that stuff, and he doesn't water ski, but he hand cycles, and just similar things. And that not so that sort of similar. If I can't do it at the same level, I don't. It's may not be right, but that's where I am so far. I haven't gotten back into percussion, so I've thought about playing a different instrument, but that's really come into play. But there's so many different things. I mean, relationships. There's obviously things that come into play with that, and the first time I went out on a first date, and I was used to getting the door for them, and I do tend to have a little bit of it's that dark humor that EMS gives you sometimes, I think.
Oh yeah.
So I do tend to, if I'm struggling with somebody, tend to meet it with humor first, which sometimes can be good, but sometimes in relationships that can also get annoying because they know that I'm skating around something. But the first couple of first dates that I was on, joking and said, I could open the door for you, but you're still going to have to wait until I go and get into my car. And because I still transfer into the front seat and then break my chair down and throw it into the back seat. And, I don't want to hit you in the head with a wheel or something. So I'll open the door, but you're going to have to wait a minute and close it yourself, and try and hit it with humor. But, it took a while of the humor and just doing it for a little bit to sort of get past that, wondering what, thinking about it, and realizing the ones that mind don't matter, and the ones that matter don't mind, and just sort of getting into that deal. But so much of it is just, it's all different, and everybody has their own process, and so yeah, the EMS, it still hurts a little bit, but I love what I'm doing now, and I've loved several of the jobs that I've had since then, so that helps. But I still get that twinge every once in a while, and some of it is just doing things differently, and some of it's just knowing that you can't do it and moving on. But I mean, there's all sorts of I don't want to say mind tricks to play, but somebody told me early on, you can focus on the 1,000 things that you can't do anymore, or you can focus on the 10,000 things you still can do. And I choose to focus on that. So much of the quote unquote getting over things or getting through things is remembering that pain is inevitable, that suffering is optional, and not trying to pass over things that hurt, but kind of trying to feel that emotion and then look for ways to get past it and get through it and move on.
No, I get that. I get that, Adam. I remember when I used to hear songs, because I'm going on 30 years, for maybe 30 years next January. And, I still, when I hear them playing our song and the action, and I'm like, oh man, I really, really enjoy doing that. And as a former musician myself, I was a keyboard player. And even though
Okay.
you can have, different type of Pro Tools, Reasons, and all these other different things, but it wasn't the same of me doing phraseology with my hands and doing certain things. So I get that, because I tried it a little bit, did a couple of songs and everything. I was really happy with, but it just wasn't the same. And that's when I kind of gravitated towards broadcast journalism, and that became like my new outlet to use my creativity with video editing and all these other things. And to hear you say that, Adam, I totally get that, because I get that. I know exactly how you feel with that. And when you look at when you first was injured in the early years,
Mm.
what were some of the things that kind of helped you to kind of refocus on maybe a new career, maybe the fitness aspect of it that you excel in? And I'm going to ask you some tips, because you are in a lot better shape than me, and I want to make sure that I get my sexy back. So I need your help with that. So if you don't mind
I'll
sharing
see
that
what
with
I
me.
can do.
All right, that sounds good. So please share that with, if you don't mind.
Sure. Early on, I had a couple of moments of clarity, and then and also remembering some things from prior to my injury that helped me. But early on, I realized that God didn't do this to me. Like He didn't cause the injury, but He can bring something out of it. And so it shifted my focus to how can what has happened to me help other people, and how can I use this to make a difference. So that helped with everything, but specifically looking for the types of jobs that I wanted. And I wasn't sure how to parlay that into a job, but I knew that I wanted to do that. And I got into fitness later in life, but it had become a pretty major part of my life prior to the injury. And one of the things that I really missed, and I had dreams about for a few years post injury, was running. And I enjoyed cycling off and on. I had done it as a kid, in my teens, and then sort of stopped for quite a while and gotten into it later in life. And I'd gotten into lifting weights and doing all sorts of different stuff. And I was on the tactical medic team prior to my injury. And so we went out and trained with the SWAT teams in the area, and
Hmm.
went on call outs with them, so that, if one of them went down, instead of having to wait until the scene got cleared, we would actually be there with them and could take care of them, and they could continue on the mission. And a lot of that training really helped me in my rehab and just sort of getting back into that, because I'd had several days, you're in black gear with ceramic plates on and a black helmet. And so you're carrying extra weight and everything's black and it's hot, and having several times where I didn't think I could go on anymore, but everybody else was. So I didn't want to be the guy that wimped out, so to say, and then had to, look bad in front of everybody else, which I know is ego. But, so I pushed through, and I found out that I could do more than I thought my body could. And so in physical therapy, I figured we only had so much per day. So if they asked me if I needed to take a break, I'd be like, no, I'll take a break after the session. Or if they asked me to do 10 of something, I would do 12. Or if they asked me to do 3 sets of 10, I would just do 30. And I just pushed because I knew early on that as I was talking to myself that I could lie around and mope, and a year from then I would still be lying around, or I could push myself and I would have as close to a normal life as I could. And so that was just sort of the drive. I mean, it was at first it was to get out of the hospital, and then it was I'm out, now what? And so it was to push to be able to function. I'm tired of people having to drive me around and to like be worried every time that I'm transferring in and out of a car and using the transfer board. So first it was not to have to use the transfer board, and then it was to still not have the person sitting there waiting to finally. Now my common response, if I'm out and about and somebody asks me if I need help when I'm getting into my car, it's like, no, thanks. I'm sort of in a hurry, just because it would take longer to explain to them how to help me than to actually just do it myself. So, and then as far as the fitness, after I got done with therapy, it was late October. And so the holidays were sort of coming up, and, it wasn't a high priority. And by January, I had put on a bunch of weight and I didn't feel as good. I was like, man, I'm 2 months post being done with therapy, and I feel worse than when I was doing therapy every day. And so it was just a matter of wanting to get active again. And it started out as I could go and work out, or I could go run errands that day, but I couldn't do both. And, eventually it got to the point where I could do both. And then I started working, I got involved with, as far as working, I got involved with United Spinal about a year after my injury. And, I just started meeting people, and I was also at the gym all the time. And so I got involved with Think First, which is a brain and spinal cord injury prevention program. And I was doing speaking with them, and just being out and about and doing things, opportunities presented themselves. And I just sort of followed those. They always seemed to come up when, if I wasn't making enough at a job, another job would sort of come up that I could make more, or maybe it was a second part-time job. Because when I was doing triathlon from 2009 to 2014, I had part-time jobs just so I had more time to train and I could travel to go to races. And so there was a lot of, I was trying to do the next right thing. I was trying to do what was right in front of me and take advantage of opportunities that I've been given. And by doing that, then other opportunities would just sort of come up, and different connections were made. And most of my jobs that I've had since the injury have come about because I've met people and they've recommended me, and either through volunteering or work that I was doing at a different position. And so, not that that's why I volunteered, but just being connected in the community, and doing the best that I could and trying to do the next right thing brought up other opportunities that I may not have expected.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We got a little chance to know you a little bit better and about your journey, being a spinal cord injury survivor like I am, and how we're thriving and we're not letting that stop us. And Adam, let's talk about now this trip that you embarked upon. It started in San Diego, California, not too far from where I live. And what was it like being out there? How many hours a day did you do hand cycling? When did you take a break? Fill in those gaps for us if you don't mind.
Sure. It really ranged a lot. And early on in the planning, it's always been dangerous to cycle across the country. And while I was planning, several people were hit and killed on regular bicycles, and they sit up much higher than I do on the hand cycle. And I'd already been nervous. There are several states that you can't have a chase vehicle behind you, because when I first started planning, I was thinking, I'll just have somebody driving behind me, maybe somebody in front of me, and we'll get that extra protection so I don't have to worry about getting hit. And that wasn't necessarily going to be an option. So I decided that I would ride paths or trails in each city and then drive from one city to the next. So I put in mileage in San Diego on trails, and then I drove to Phoenix, put in more miles in Phoenix, and then continued on the path. And the number of hours a day really depended how I felt, the weather, all sorts of different things came into play. But typical day was a little over 3 hours, sometimes up to 4.5. It really depended. I was trying to do 50 miles a day, and it just didn't work out, especially in the beginning. I had some issues with the hotel room the first day that I was supposed to be riding, and was unable to get out at all. And then the next day I got out. The third day I had some stomach issues. So, stuff like that popped up. But by the time I was riding consistently, I was trying to do 40 or 45 miles a day just to sort of keep that consistency possible, just for training leading up to it, because I have a job. I didn't get to the point where I wanted to get to. So I think just it was necessary to do about 40, 45 miles a day. So depending on all sorts of different variables, that's usually a shade under 3 hours to 3.5 hours, just depending on terrain, winds, weather, all that sort of good stuff. And it was really an amazing trip, and I didn't get as much press as I had hoped. And there were some times where they would be calling and I would call them back, and we just couldn't get up. And then other places, Oklahoma City, or in the Tornado Alley, we were sending press releases a week and a half, 5 days, 2 days before I got into town. And all 3 days that we sent press releases to Oklahoma City stations, tornadoes hit. So obviously they are going to focus their attentions on the tornadoes and not these other press releases coming in. So, but one great thing is if you get out of a van in a wheelchair and you start pulling a hand cycle out and messing around with it and airing up tires, it tends to draw attention. So I got a lot of people that would just stop and talk to me that were getting ready to go for a walk or a run or a bike ride themselves on the same trails that I was riding. And so they'd stop and ask questions and about the bike, and then I would tell them what I was doing, and watch their heads explode, and have conversations, which sometimes meant that I got a little shorter ride in that day, because there are a few days where San Diego, especially because I started in April, I would go later in the day just so it would warm up, because the trails I were riding were down by the sea. So 62 and windy is awfully chilly if you're somebody with a spinal cord injury. So I would wait until it got up a little bit higher and then go for a ride. And so there were a couple of times which was perfect, because somebody would stop me as I was unloading and they'd want to talk. And I'd, take the time to talk to them and maybe get a 2-hour ride in instead of a 3-hour ride. But there were several times where I was loading up afterwards and they would talk to me, which, then it's dark, and they would apologize, and I'd tell them that's the reason I was out there. That brought me up, because until Pittsburgh, I was by myself. So I had my service dog with me, and that was it. And so, you go so many days where it's just you in a hotel room, and, maybe talking to somebody at a restaurant or something for a few moments, and talking to family on the phone. But those days where people would stop and talk to me, that really helped the loneliness that can happen on the road.
Very impressive, Adam, what you were able to do. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be able to do maybe 1 mile, and I would probably poop out. So you got to help me out to get that endurance. One thing that I really appreciate about you, Adam, is that you were doing this to help raise money, to help us all out in the spinal cord injury community. And we we applaud you for that, because that's, sometimes being a spinal cord injury uh, survivor, we we can get a little selfish sometimes. We can get a little self-centered. It's all about us and what can somebody do for us. And it's refreshing what you're doing for the whole community, Adam. And that's, we need to be more like you when it comes to that, and think of others and not ourselves. And I know you talked about your faith and everything, and that, that's really what has carried me over the 30 years since my injury. And some who don't get that, they have not tasted to see how good spiritual food is to help give us the proper outlook on a lot of things. And
Yeah, it doesn't have
it's
to be my faith, but man, some sort of faith or spiritual journey makes a huge difference. And
yeah,
that's it. I mean, mine's changed for me over the years, before and after the injury. But another thing that really struck home to me is, I don't know what your experience was after your injury, but I was in EMS, and then you also work with fire departments, and you work with police departments, and the number of people that I had at the hospital, they had somebody from my department, because the people I was riding with knew that I worked for the department and didn't know how to get a hold of my family, so they called the department. They had somebody at the hospital prior to the helicopter landing at the hospital that I was in, and they had somebody there 24 hours a day for the first 2 weeks, and then somebody there from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for the rest of the next 3 weeks that I was in uh, the rehab unit, just sort of being a liaison between my family and all the visitors that I got coming in, because I did have both because of my faith and because I've been in recovery, and just friends and the firefighters and police officers and fellow EMS folks. I just had tons of visitors coming in, and they also, the department that I worked for, made sure that I understood that I had short-term disability, and made sure that I got all the paperwork that I needed to do that, and didn't even have to think about it. My disability retirement, they built ramps onto my aunt and uncle's house that I moved into, and then they were going to do my dad's house, and there was a lot going on, so that they kind of forgot about it. And then Christmas was coming up, and my dad happened to mention that we normally have Christmas at his house, and so they were out there in December in Kansas building a ramp onto his house so we could have Christmas at his house. And the overwhelming support that I had from other people, a lot of people, because I've done some things, talk about what an inspiration my attitude was, and that all that I've done since my injury. And I always am quick to say that the only reason I was able to do any of that is because all of the support that I had. I would not be where I am today if I didn't have the friends, the family members. My dad was at the hospital every day, all day. We had to kick him out on his birthday so that other family members could take him out for a nice dinner. He was there. He moved in with my aunt and uncle, because for the first, can't remember if it was month or 2 months, I had to wear a brace, so I wasn't able to get in and out of the shower on my own, and I wasn't able to do the bowel program on my own. And he was there to do that, and glad to do it. And so I had all of this support. And then when I started doing peer mentoring through United Spinal, one thing that became very apparent to me very quickly is most people don't have that. And I had that because nothing that I had done. It was the people that I had been blessed to be surrounded by. And so I wanted to give that to people. And then going and, mentoring guys, and they're, I specifically remember going to see a gentleman that was about the same age as me. It was a few years after my injury. It must have been 5 years, because I was in my apartment. And I rolled in, and he asked how I got there. And I told him I drove, and his mind was blown because I drove, and then he asked where I was living because he thought I was also living in a nursing facility. So when I told him that I lived in an apartment on my own, it blew his mind. And when I told him that I was working and living independently, and he, he could not fathom that. And so, one, just getting out there and telling people that, life is possible after a spinal cord injury, and depending on your level of injury, different, there's varying levels of how much help you might need, but you can go out and you can have a life. And, so just the thought that he was in a nursing home and thought that that's what his life was going to have to be, one, letting him know that didn't have to be. And then also two, being able to connect him with some resources so that he could get some help getting from where he was to where he wanted to be. And just, yeah, I mean, I was given so much, and it wasn't because I'm anything special. I just happen to have amazing friends and family and coworkers, which are also family, that I want to pass that along so other people can get the same benefit of that support and live their fullest life with a spinal cord injury. Everybody should have that path. It's just that it's not a clear path for everybody. And I mean, a lot of ableism, as much as it is difficult to deal with, it also has that newly injured person, because of ableism, they don't think that anything other than a nursing home is possible. And so I try to remember that. I do get annoyed. I will be the first person to admit I am human. So, but when I'm out grocery shopping and somebody comes up to me and tells me that it's good to see me out, I know that it is well-intentioned, but I also know that that comes from ableism, thinking that it's odd to see somebody out in a wheelchair. I want to get to the point where it's so normal to see somebody out in a wheelchair doing their grocery shopping, going on dates, working, all of that thing, that nobody thinks anything of it. So they don't think that they need to come up and say something like that.
Yeah, I get that. I definitely get that. And, I think back to my family support system too. And that really helped me out too, because I wouldn't been able to do it without support of my family and my fiance at the time, who decided to marry me 3 years later, because we were supposed to get married in '93, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when I had my accident. So our wedding was pushed back 6 more years. So she decided to stay there with me and everything. So
Oh,
that support
wonderful.
system, that support system really helped. And you know what I tell people when they say it's good to see me out? You know what I tell them, Adam? I said
What's
it's
that?
good. I say it's good to see you too out. And then they're looking like, well, yeah, it's good to see you out too. So I kind of flip the script on them sometime, and then it gets them to think like, wow, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. So
Yeah.
to teach them
I have
object.
a couple of times. It's probably not the best response. It was funny, but it's probably not the right thing to say. But somebody, has asked me, just a random person, it's one thing if I'm getting to know somebody and they ask about my injury, but a random person in the grocery store or whatever is, what happened to you? And I was like, oh, I had a motorcycle accident. What happened to you? And then they're like, oh, just like,
Yeah, yeah. It's I used to always get when I got injured, because I lived in Long Beach, um, frequent South Central a lot, Compton,
mm,
all the hoods, and everybody always would say, "Did you get shot?" And I'm like, "No, it was an automobile accident, so I didn't get shot." So, but I'm glad I finally stopped getting that. But I was in Rancho Los Amigos with a lot of guys who did get shot, so
sure.
I guess the averages was on their side, that I did get shot. But why even bring that to somebody's attention if they
Yeah.
did get
What
shot?
if you
So
had
yeah,
oh, let me relive this worst day that
yeah,
ever. Thanks. Yeah.
yeah.
But I do
It's
get, I mean, I've got, the high and tight haircut, and I tend to keep myself in shape. So I get a lot of, oh, did you serve? And there's just no good response to that, because no, I, I'm sorry. Now I feel bad because I didn't serve, type of deal. And, God
yes,
bless the guys that did, but
yeah,
I didn't. So now, nope, I'm just an idiot.
yeah.
I don't have a good story. Sorry.
No, I get it, and Adam, before I let you go, anything else from this whole experience of hand biking across the United States. What are some of the memories you're going to take away from this whole experience?
There are several. And the one thing that I noticed early on in the journey and just continued on, and what amazing way to see the country. And I'd seen places that I'd either just been in the airport before or been to places that I've never been, and drove around parts of the eastern part of the country that I'd never been, and just the ignorance, like driving into Pittsburgh. I was like, I had no idea that there are a bunch of mountains around Pittsburgh. They're not the Rockies by any stretch, but they are mountains. And I just, that ignorance of like not knowing my geography very well. But one of the things that, I mean, you couldn't get any more different from San Diego to Oklahoma to Columbus, Ohio to New York. But and the country does seem to be very divided right now. And there are some things that we are pretty divided on, but there are good people all across the country, no matter what type of city. I've never believed in the flyover state deal. I'm from Kansas City originally, and I've been all over the country, and I still think Kansas City is one of the best cities in the nation. But it's a well-kept secret. But people are generally good across the country. And, I met Democrats and I met Republicans across the country, and most of them were pretty nice. And just that it gave me a little bit of hope. The roll on Capitol Hill that United Spinal Association does every year always gives me hope, because you go in and you feel like you're a part of the government, and your voice is being heard. Which was also true because I got to take part in that again this year. But being in different cities all across the country, in different regions of the country, there are good people everywhere across the country, and we're not as different as it can sometimes seem. And then just all the different people that I either met or this was in the middle of a pandemic, and there have been ups and downs and all of that. But so going back to Kansas City, it was the first time that I'd seen several of the people since before the pandemic. I'd seen my family members that lived there, but getting to meet with the United Spinal chapter in Kansas City, and they had a picnic while I was there, and there were 50 or 60, maybe more people out, and just seeing the group there and seeing several people that I had, spent all kinds of time with, and meeting new people, and just meeting people from different chapters across the country was amazing. And here's the deal. I did do something that was difficult and challenging, and I don't want to downplay what I'm doing, but the people that are involved in advocacy and working with people with spinal cord injuries day in and day out, and are consistent year in and year out, that have been doing the work for a very long time, that is something that I struggle with. I get involved in things, and I've been involved with United Spinal for a long time, but that consistency of day in and day out, being consistent in the work, I'm not always good at that. I'm better at that with fitness, but with advocacy, I'm not. And so working and meeting those people and working with them, it has given me some more motivation and intention to get better with that, and continue to grow in that, because that's the deal. We've all got room to grow, and it's just one of those areas that it shined a lot on that. But the trip in general, was it difficult? Yes. And more of the difficulties were traveling with the spinal cord injury and being gone for 3 months and trying to pack catheters and suppositories and getting that timed out right and all that stuff. And yes, the daily riding was challenging, but man, overall it was worth it. There were amazing things, and I didn't raise as much money as I'd hoped, but I'd made connections with people, and I'm hoping that I've done the work to lay a foundation so that, if somebody else wants to do it, I can get them the information that they need to go on, and we can grow this. And it doesn't have to be the end. And we can, hopefully I planted a seed that we can take this and grow it into something bigger. And, whether it be several different things in several different cities at the same time, or somebody going across the country or something, I know that there's something there. And so I'm looking forward to working with United Spinal to move on from there.
Awesome. And Adam, we appreciate you. Stories like yours need to be magnified, and not some of the divisive storylines that always lead different news organizations, different websites, whatever it is. Stories like this need to trend to let people know that there is some still amazing, good people in the world, and not everybody's at each other's throat. So we are going to help magnify that message, Adam, and not only because you're one of my relatives, but because you are just an awesome guy. And Adam, I look forward to chatting with you again as you continue to push the envelope and helping us out. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed it.
A huge shout out to my relative, Adam Lane. See the family resemblance that we have? Now, I really enjoyed chatting with him about his injury, about his recovery, and really about his mindset over the years and how he had to refocus and pursue different angles after his injury. But wasn't it amazing? Handcycling across America. And to find out about that experience, getting a front row seat, so to speak, with our mind's eye of what he was able to do. Really, really appreciate having him on. You can find out more about our Strong Will Together campaign. Go to our website, unitedspinal.org. There you can see what it means to be strong willed together. You can support many causes, like Adam talked about, and others. And don't forget to go to our website too and find out some great things that we're doing when it comes to just informing individuals out there, taking care of veterans, and doing a lot of great things that you may not be aware of. So do us a favor. Give us a look on our website. And also share this episode too with ones that you would think would benefit this and this talk. Well, it's time for me to get out of here. Until next time, folks, please stay healthy, stay safe, and remember, yes, I love you guys to life. Take care.